Welcome back to Nation of Glory, the home of stories that celebrate legends, the men and women who stepped into the arena of life, fought their battles, and left behind echoes that never fade. Today, we remember a man whose name once electrified crowds across the world. A man who lived with fire in his heart, muscle in his frame, and an attitude that said, "I am wonderful." This is the story of Paul Parlett Orndorff Jr., known to the world as Mr. Wonderful. Born on October 29, 1949, in Winchester, Virginia, Paul didn't grow up in the bright lights of fame. He was a small-town kid with big dreams and an even bigger will. His father, Paul Sr., worked hard to provide, and his mother, Essie, held the family together with faith and grit. In a time when television wrestling was just finding its way into homes, little Paul didn't yet know that one day he'd stand in that ring not as a fan, but as a legend. As a young boy, Paul wasn't just strong, he was fierce. He played football, trained hard, and built a body that looked like it was carved from iron, but more than his muscles, it was his mindset that set him apart. He wasn't the kind of kid who quit when someone said you can't. Paul took it as a challenge to prove them wrong. High school came and went, and Paul's talent on the football field was impossible to ignore. He earned a scholarship to the University of Tampa, where he played as a fullback. He wasn't just good, he was incredible. His teammates saw him as unstoppable, fast, powerful, relentless. But fate, as it often does, had its own script. Injuries and twists of circumstance kept Paul from reaching the NFL heights he dreamed of. He was drafted by the New Orleans Saints in 1973, but destiny had another ring waiting for him, a squared circle, not a football field. When football ended, something inside Paul burned even brighter. The fire to compete, to fight, to win. He turned to professional wrestling, a world of showmanship, pain, and glory. And that's where Mr. Wonderful was born. Not overnight. Not by chance. But through sweat, scars, and sheer will. In the late 1970s, Paul began wrestling in smaller promotions, grinding through long drives, cheap motels, and endless matches. He faced names that would later become icons, and every night, he gave more than a performance. He gave a piece of himself. He wasn't just another muscle-bound athlete, he had charisma, attitude, and confidence that made fans take notice. The women loved him. The men envied him. And soon, the wrestling world had found its next star. By the early 1980s, Paul Orndorff's rise was unstoppable. When he entered the World Wrestling Federation, the WWF, the world met Mr. Wonderful. And what a debut it was! With a body that looked like it was sculpted by the gods, and a personality that screamed confidence, Orndorff became one of the most talked about wrestlers of his era. He teamed up with Roddy Piper, creating one of the most entertaining and dangerous duos in professional wrestling. Together, they didn't just wrestle, they commanded the audience. Piper was chaos. Orndorff was precision. And together, they made magic. But then came the event that would etch Orndorff's name into wrestling history forever: WrestleMania I. March 31, 1985. Madison Square Garden. The world was watching. In the main event, Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff and Roddy Piper took on Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. It wasn't just a match. It was an era-defining spectacle that changed wrestling forever. Celebrities, cameras, fans, the spotlight was blinding. And right there, at the center of it all, was Orndorff, flexing, fighting, performing like his life depended on it. The match became one of the most iconic in history, launching the WWF into mainstream fame. And, though Mr. Wonderful's team lost that night, the world didn't see a loser. They saw a superstar. But behind the muscles and the spotlight, there was a man. A man who pushed himself beyond limits, often at the cost of his own body. Wrestling wasn't an easy life, the travel, the toll, the pain that never quite went away. And yet, Orndorff never slowed down. He became a fan favorite, then a villain, then a legend. His feud with Hulk Hogan in 1986 became one of the greatest rivalries of all time. Friend turned foe. Trust turned tension. And the fans couldn't look away. Week after week, millions tuned in to see Mr. Wonderful go head-to-head with the biggest name in wrestling. It wasn't just entertainment, it was storytelling at its finest. Their rivalry sold out arenas, broke television records, and built the very foundation of what wrestling entertainment would become. But fame has a price. Years of physical punishment began to take their toll. During one match, Paul suffered a serious arm injury, one that he ignored far too long. He didn't want to disappoint the fans or lose his spot. So he kept wrestling, night after night, hiding the pain, pretending everything was fine. But the damage was permanent. His right arm, once a symbol of power, began to atrophy. And soon, the body that made him Mr. Wonderful became his greatest struggle. It was a cruel twist. The same passion that made him great began to break him down. And yet, Paul Orndorff never complained. He kept performing, kept smiling, kept fighting. Because that's what warriors do. They don't quit when it hurts, they keep going, even when no one sees the pain behind the curtain. By the late 1980s, after years in the spotlight, Paul began stepping away from the ring. But the story didn't end there. He found new purpose in training others, teaching the next generation of wrestlers what it meant to be truly great. He became a mentor, a coach, and an inspiration to those who dreamed of walking the same path. In World Championship Wrestling, WCW, Orndorff continued to shine. He worked as both a performer and a trainer, shaping stars who would carry the torch into the future. He wasn't just remembered as Mr. Wonderful. He was Coach Orndorff, tough, demanding, and deeply respected. To his students, he wasn't just teaching wrestling. He was teaching life discipline, honor, and the art of never giving up. But behind that fiery passion, the years had taken their toll. The injuries, the surgeries, the pain that never really went away. And yet, whenever fans saw him at conventions, reunions, or interviews, he smiled. Because Paul knew what few ever realize. It's not about how long you stand in the spotlight. It's about how much light you bring while you're there. In the 2000s and 2010s, wrestling fans around the world still spoke his name with reverence. The younger generation might not have seen his battles live, but through clips, stories, and old footage, they discovered a man who wrestled not just with his body, but with his soul. In 2005, Paul Orndorff was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, a moment that brought his journey full circle. As his name was announced, fans rose to their feet. They cheered for the legend, the fighter, the man who once declared himself Mr. Wonderful and proved it, night after night. Standing on that stage, Orndorff looked out at the crowd, thousands of people chanting his name, and there was a glimmer in his eye. Not pride. Not ego. But gratitude. Because he knew every bruise, every injury, every sacrifice was worth it. And then, life slowed down. The cheers faded, the lights dimmed, but the memories, they never left. Paul spent his later years surrounded by family and friends, occasionally appearing at events, always humble, always gracious. But even as time went on, the warrior spirit inside him never faded. He remained strong, proud, and unbreakable even as his body grew frail. In 2021, the world received heartbreaking news. Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff passed away at the age of 71. The wrestling world mourned deeply. Not just for a performer, but for a man who had given everything to his craft. Social media flooded with tributes from fans, fellow wrestlers, and industry icons. Hulk Hogan himself called him a brother, remembering the countless battles they fought not against each other, but with each other, building an era that defined generations. But if you listen closely, even now, you can still hear the echoes of those crowds chanting his name. The sound of the ring bell. The moment the lights hit his perfect pose. Mr. Wonderful wasn't just a nickname. It was a legacy. Paul Orndorff's story is one of triumph and tragedy, glory and grit, but most of all, it's a story of heart. Because at its core, wrestling isn't just about strength or fame. It's about passion, the drive to stand up when life knocks you down, to smile when it hurts, and to never stop believing that you are capable of something wonderful. And that's exactly who Paul Orndorff was. A man who refused to quit. A man who stood tall against the odds. A man who lived, fought, and inspired millions. Even when the world stopped cheering, his story kept shining in every young wrestler who dreams of greatness, in every fan who remembers the golden age, and in every soul that believes in fighting till the end. So when you hear the name Mr. Wonderful, remember it's not just about wrestling. It's about believing in yourself when no one else does. It's about walking into the arena of life with your head high, knowing that you might fall, but you'll rise again, stronger than ever. Paul Orndorff may have left the ring, but his spirit never left us. He lives in the legacy of courage, in the echoes of fans still cheering his name, and in the hearts of everyone who ever dared to chase greatness. So here's to Mr. Wonderful, the man who proved that being wonderful isn't about being perfect. It's about being fearless, passionate, and true to who you are. And that is what makes a legend. Thank you for watching Nation of Glory. If you felt inspired by this story, if you believe in the power of resilience, passion, and legacy, then honor the legend by keeping his story alive. Hit that like button, share this video with fellow fans of wrestling history, and subscribe to Nation of Glory for more stories that celebrate the heart behind the hero. Because legends never die. They just live forever in glory.